am recording this for our YouTube channel. So again, this call is being recorded so that you have this resource to go back, or you can share with other people in your chapter, other secretary treasurers within your district, or just anyone who's looking to learn. So this will be a great resource for them and for yourself to go back onto, and you will get the slides later as well. Some housekeeping items is most of you are already muted, but please keep yourselves on mute so that the audio is clear for the recording. And if you do have questions, go ahead right now and identify where the chat is. And we hope that you will be engaged. So once we get through the presentation, it should last about half of the time. The rest will just be Q&A. And I'm going to ask you to all, if you want to share your thoughts, because this is not just about us telling you what to do, but to help you kind of do some self-discovery with one another as well, because you never know, you could pick up a really good idea here or there. All right. So without further ado, I will pass things over to our speakers for introductions and their presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bon, for the opportunity to speak here today with everyone. It is a great privilege, and I'm so stinking excited to get into this. So part one is going to focus on responsibilities and resources primarily. So Patrick and I are going to try to provide you as many resources as possible, and also just clearly outlining each of your basic requirements and responsibilities in office. So with that being said, let's introduce our faces here. This face, my name is Grant Winternheimer. I am a member of the New Upsilon chapter at Ball State University, which was actually just installed December 1st of 2018. So almost 2 years old now. I am studying music education here at Ball State and studying on the trombone. And my office is North Central District Secretary Treasurer.
Hi, everyone. My face is Patrick Caraveo. I come from the Alpha Chi chapter at the University of Texas at El Paso. My major is also music education, and I play the euphonium, so it's kind of cool because me and Grant are really similar in instruments. And then I'm the Southwest District Secretary Treasurer.
Great. Yeah, that's so cool. Within 5 minutes of meeting, Patrick and I found out that we both own a Mac, and we both play low brass, so we're in good company here. Do you have something to say about overview, Patrick?
Yeah, so today's presentation is going to go over officer roles in the fraternities division, officer member responsibilities, member statuses, and disciplinary actions, event promotion, social media and websites, secretary-specific responsibilities and templates, treasurer-specific responsibilities and templates, some comprehensive resources, and finishing it off with a Q&A.
Great, so let's get into the first topic here, officer roles in fraternities division. So Patrick and I thought that it would be of your best interest to just start with why you're in this organization and what you have agreed to as being part of this organization, being installed as either a secretary or a treasurer. So we're going to reference this document a lot throughout here. It's the officer manual. You'll see it linked there at the top. This manual is a little outdated, so some of the information on that manual isn't as accurate as it is on these slides. So while I encourage you to use that resource, I encourage you to use these slides as a resource as well. So first off, what did you agree whenever you took that oath of office? Great question. So there are 4 big things that you agreed to, and conveniently enough, they all start with an R. The first thing is reasons, or the purpose. You agreed to the promoting those purposes and the ideals of our fraternity within the oath of office. You also agreed to upholding the responsibilities of your office. And if you have a big old question mark on what those responsibilities are, don't worry. Hopefully this presentation will be the answer for you. You also agreed to uphold the values and the symbols of our ritual. So it's important that you understand what occurs in our ritual and all of the implications of that ritual within our chapter operations. And then finally, and maybe potentially most important right now, is that you agreed to be resilient. And you agreed to strive for the highest in all that you do, regardless of the circumstances, but taking into consideration the circumstances that we are undergoing. Obviously, a lot of us are undergoing a lot of mental, emotional, and social stress that we maybe usually don't. But it's important that you still make time for your office. And if you're unable to, that you have you communicate with other officers about how to best do that while still keeping your mental, emotional, and social health in check. It's also important to understand what our organization exists for and those primary purposes. So we exist to empower and influence a vibrant and diverse college band movement. And I've underlined those keywords because I believe a lot of those are specifically relevant in today's social climate to consider how we empower and how we influence both a vibrant and diverse college band movement. It's also important that we have purposeful programming and unified messaging. So as secretaries and treasurers, we need to make sure that our budgets, our minutes, our forms of communication with the chapter, forms of correspondence are all in alignment. They're all as transparent as possible and making our values as transparent as possible to people within our chapter, but also outside of our chapter. It's also important to understand how our mission statement relates to our pillars. So we exist to serve and support the bands and encourage musical growth and educational experience, leadership opportunities, and recognition. So that is something that you should have like taped on your forehead every day as you're going out and you're trying to live out those principles and those pillars. So secretaries and treasurers are what I'll call program neutral offices because you don't specifically exist to promote any one of those pillars. There are other offices that may exist in your chapter that exist to, hold music events or hold brotherhood events, but your office is program neutral, meaning that it's your job to equitably promote all of the pillars. And I use the keyword equitably because it's not necessarily equally. Right now, if I am to like personalize this and project my own experiences onto this, right now our chapter has a great need for brotherhood and a great need for leadership because service and music are a lot more difficult to come by. And a lot of people are dealing with, again, those strains on their mental and emotional health. Brotherhood is really important, and so is leadership. So as a treasurer, a secretary, you need to take your responsibilities and apply them accordingly to the pillars that need best promoted. And I believe our pillars are the intersection of our how and why. And we talk a lot about in this organization that we should start with our why. And then I think it's important that we also focus on the next step, which is applying that in the how. Thankfully enough, both of those things exist in our pillars. So we exist to serve the band. How do we do that? Through serving the band. Okay, that's a very simplistic way to view this, but it's important that we keep both the why and the how in our minds at every point in the process. And the last point here is the role of representation. So this, I believe, is your primary responsibility. That's not explicitly spelled out in your oath of office or in the Constitution. It is the responsibility to represent your members to the best of your ability. And so that means upholding all of those values we already talked about so that people within your chapter can see what those are, but also people outside of your chapter can see what Kappa Kappa Psi exists for. And so that means that you have to have the knowledge to do that. So that means study up on these resources that we provide you. Communication skills. So if you study up on them but aren't able to communicate them in any way, they're not living documents. We want to make sure those are living documents. And so you live out those in your actions and in your words. And then you have a focused passion. So making sure that you are able to motivate other individuals to also attain those same principles. One thing I'll say, this is a side note right here. If you have any questions related to anything we talk about, and you don't think you can track those questions throughout the whole presentation, please just throw them in the chat, and then we will discuss them at the very end.
Great. So moving on to officer/member responsibilities. So with deadlines and dues, though it may seem that it comes from the officers primarily, it actually comes from the whole chapter. So the chapter personnel report has all of the names and initiation dates and everything of everyone. So it's really important that everyone always puts in effort to these. So just a few deadlines to remember. The chapter personnel report is coming up on September 30th, and the early bird award is September 15th. So you still got time if you haven't done so already to win an award for submitting paperwork. The fall activity report is due September 1st, and the chapter summary report is due June 1st. So dues, there are national dues and there are chapter dues. National membership dues are $105 per brother, and each chapter pays a $100 chapter fee, which is included with the payment of the chapter personnel report. Some chapters also have chapter dues. The amount of the chapter dues is at the discretion of each chapter. With the past national convention, the chapter dues cannot be above the maximum amount of $105 per person. So chapter dues are really awesome because they help fund chapter projects throughout the year. Some chapters do semesterly chapter dues and others do yearly chapter dues.
Dang it, I need to figure out these mute settings. Okay, so membership statuses. Why is this important in our office to understand various membership statuses? Sure, we talked about it in the Road to Wisdom, but why, Grant, are you bringing this up again? Well, the reason is that it is especially pertinent to our secretaries and treasurers office because as secretaries, we have to take attendance and we also have to maintain a system of contact with members of various statuses. As treasurers, we need to know who we need to collect money for and the varying amounts of due collection that Patrick just talked about for those members. Also, as treasurers, we need to consider our various membership statuses as opportunities for fundraising, either through a chapter due, as Patrick just discussed, or through outreach with alumni members. Obviously, for both of us, both secretaries and treasurers, it is important that we uphold these membership statuses as well. So you're not only officers, you're first and foremost members. So you need to make sure that you are checking off all these items as well. So one of the active membership requirements is that you are a registered student and member of the college or university. I'll stop right there. That's what's important, that you are still a registered student or member of the college or university in which you attend. Now, in terms of the band program, the requirement, the ensemble requirement, due to pivot guidance, there is no ensemble requirement for this semester, but in normal circumstances, there is a requirement to be in a band ensemble on campus. There's a number of other responsibilities there. Attend all meetings of the chapter, pay promptly all financial obligations to both the chapter and the fraternity. Treasurers, that's kind of your thing to make sure that that happens with all the active members. Become acquainted with the national constitution, district constitution, the local constitution, and the history of Kappa Kappa Psi. I want to emphasize the word acquainted, and I would upgrade it to like you want to be friends with those documents more than just acquaintances. So we all know that those documents exist, but you need to know what is in each of those documents so that you can point people in the right direction if they have any questions. As officers, that's your responsibility to your members. You need to support the efforts and purposes of the chapter and fraternity. A note for associates, this is where active membership and associate membership differ only on this one point, which is that it is available to members in good standing of Tau Beta Sigma who transfer to another school with only a Kappa Kappa Psi chapter. And an additional note on just general transfer members, which is a membership status that is not talked about hardly ever, but as a transfer member, I'm going to use this platform to talk about it for a second. So active membership will be granted to the member upon enrollment in the band program at the new school and the fulfillment of all financial obligations. So essentially transfer members are active memberships, active members, except they have an additional form that needs to be completed in order to ensure that they come fully into the chapter. Conditional membership, what's important with conditional membership is that you realize that these individuals still have to pay dues. So as treasurers, you need to make sure that even if a person says that they will take conditional status, that you still collect their $105 per year. Also, as far as their responsibilities are concerned, they will have varying responsibilities based on the contract that the executive board and the chapter as a whole develop for those conditional members, but it's important to know that they are not eligible to hold office or propose candidates for membership, introduce business, so on and so forth. What's important is if you decided to take conditional status, you could not maintain your office as secretary or treasurer. Those two things cannot happen simultaneously. Inactive status is essentially an active member who has decided not to pay dues for a semester. They may still attend the university. They are then given inactive status, and they have no privileges of fraternity membership. Alumni or life membership, it's important to understand that these people are an important point of contact as treasurers and secretaries, but in terms of due collection, that is something that they do independently of the chapter. Honorary membership, if you decide as a chapter that you want to gain an honorary member to your chapter, there is a certain fee associated with that that is to be paid by the chapter. So all the dang words that I just said are pretty much all summarized in that fun little chart at the bottom. So on the left side is due collection, attendance, and contact information. So these are the responsibilities of our treasurers and secretaries as it relates to membership statuses. And then we have across whether or not those things apply to each of those statuses. So in general, you want to make sure that you're collecting dues from all the people that you're supposed to collect dues from. From honoraries, you're not collecting dues from them, but you are paying for their honorary initiate fee, which will be discussed later what exactly that fee is. Attendance, you want to make sure that you're taking attendance of active members, especially because that is the only one that is required as part of their membership status. All the others, you don't necessarily need to take attendance for them in meetings. Conditional, it might be based on the conditional contract you work out. And then for contact information, you want to make sure that you maintain contact with as many of these individuals as possible, as important resources and as important points of fundraising. So I'll let you snap a picture of that if you'd like. Again, these slides will be available to you after the conclusion of this presentation. That being said, let's move on to event promotion, social media, and websites. So again, you ask Grant, why is this relevant to us? Well, as secretaries and treasurers, we are responsible for a certain level of correspondence, both with our chapter and across the district. As secretaries, we may also head a communications committee, which may be more geared towards social media and websites for the chapter. As treasurers, these are important platforms in order to establish and promote various fundraisers. So when you're promoting an event, there are certain questions that you need to answer for those that you intend on attending the event. Those questions are when, where, how, and why. And try to answer those as specifically but as succinctly as possible so that you can mitigate or you can, make your future self's job easier so you don't have to deal with all those questions from the people that you are looking to attend the event. So you want to make sure that you outline exactly what the purpose of the event is and be as specific as possible. If you're holding a fundraiser and you're promoting that fundraiser saying, we want money for our chapter, that's probably not going to be sufficient. People aren't going to be motivated to come and attend your fundraiser and to give funds to that. So you need to be as specific as possible. Say, we are looking to raise $500 in order to purchase stands for the music school. Now that is not enough to tell the purpose of it. You also need to say why that is relevant to your purposes, but also why it is relevant to the attendees. What are they going to get out of it? And how can you get them to take some level of ownership or responsibility in the project or event? Time and date, you need to clarify those things. And in the world of Zoom, you need to be specific with time zones. So if Bong had put this thing out there and it just said a general thing and no time zone attached, we could have 4 groups of people showing up at different times. So it's important that you set those time zones whenever you're having events that go beyond those time zones. You also need to consider the time frame of your promotion for events. So how are you leading up to the event? If you put all your promotional materials out a month in advance and then radio silence for the next month, you're probably going to get radio silence on the day of the event. So you want to make sure that you are, to use a musical term, crescendoing to the promoted event as best you can. Also, whenever you're setting times or you're communicating these times, specifically as secretaries, you want to make sure that you communicate any setup time for volunteers that are volunteering for the event. So if your event starts at 7, but it's going to take an hour to set up the event, you should communicate that to your volunteers so that they know when they are to show up and they don't show up at the time that the event starts. As far as venue is concerned, if it's a virtual venue, you need to communicate meeting links in any of your promotions. Make sure that those are out there. If it is a physical in-person space, you need to make sure you reserve those spaces well in advance, that you figure out any requirements that the host site might have, whether or not you can have food or music in those venues, and also whether there are parking locations nearby and how much they cost. That's for people coming out of town for your events. Again, all of this is more relevant to physical in-person events. But if there are any of those additional costs, you need to communicate those as well. Materials needed. So your volunteers, what are they responsible for bringing? What are you going to bring to the event? And are there is there anything that the attendees could bring to the event to decrease the amount of things that your chapter may need to bring? Cost. How much is it going to cost for you to put on the event? So treasurers and secretaries, this is kind of where our responsibilities intermingle. So how much is it going to cost to host the event? and how much are you seeking to gain in revenue from the event. And obviously, if it's a fundraiser, you want the latter number to be greater than the former. You want more revenue than the cost it is for you to put on the event. Communication means, so now that we have all the details worked out for our events, we need to make sure that we consider how we're going to communicate that. So we already talked about frequency, the pacing, crescendoing to the event. We also need to think about the various platforms we're going to use. If it's a virtual platform, we're going to try to use emails or listservs or social media or websites. If it's a more physical platform, we could use the school newspaper, ensemble announcements during ensemble rehearsal time, or maybe you're tabling in a location that a lot of people go through on your campus, or maybe you're just putting posters up around campus. Also, points of contact, who people should contact if they have any questions about the events, and specifically who you are contacting and who is your interested audience. Promotional design. So now that you know what you want to say and you know how you want to say it, now you have to figure out what you're going to use to say it. So possible resources, Canva, Piktochart. I would recommend Canva. Both of those are free resources to put together different designs, promotional designs. I would also recommend that you find the visual design students in your chapter and on your campus and utilize their expertise for that. Also, there is a resource at headquarters. His name is Robert Bratcher, and those are for larger projects. So his whole role is for promotional design for the fraternity, but that would not be at a small level. That would be cross-chapter if you have like a state day or if you have a district-wide event. He is a possible resource at headquarters to contact for promotional design. You want to make sure that in your promotional design that you are upholding the national branding guidelines, which are listed there at the bottom. It's a beautiful document, and if you have never seen that document, it is on the website and will be accessible on these slides. Social media websites. So from the chapter level, you want to make sure that you utilize as many platforms as you can possibly upkeep. So as secretary specifically, this is kind of more of our responsibility, maybe if we're heading a communications committee. You want to make sure that you are more focused with quality rather than quantity when it comes to social media. So if you can only maintain a Facebook page, that's great, so long as it is, transparently communicating your values as a chapter. If you are in a position where you can do all of these platforms and a LinkedIn and a YouTube channel and a podcast and just everything in the world, that's great. Just make sure that all of those things are being maintained and updated regularly. And utilize these as a means to connect with other chapters around the nation and around the district. Personal social media. So know that as a brother and as a member of this organization, you actually never clock in or clock out. You're always on. So make sure that any time that you are putting something on social media, that is something that would not go against our values as an organization and would not associate our chapters or our organization with principles that we don't actually believe in. Specifically focusing on the hazing policy, human dignity policy, and alcohol, illegal drugs, and controlled substance policy in our risk management policies. That is where it is most frequently broken if our risk management policies are broken, and often that is done on social media. So make sure that you are familiar with those policies. As for websites, there are a couple of websites free website creation locations there, Wix and Weebly for you. I would recommend Wix, but other people prefer Weebly, and that's fine. Other chapter websites, use those as a resource. There's one listed at the bottom. In my biased perspective, there's Ball State's website, if you want to check that out. And there's just some listing of possible content that you can have on your website. And again, if you can't maintain a website, that's totally fine. Be more concerned with quality over quantity. But if you are going to make sure that that website is regularly updated, it doesn't have information from 5 years ago on it, make sure that it is pertinent to now.
Awesome. Thank you for all that, Grant. So moving on to secretary-specific responsibilities. Looking at the Officer Training Manual for Secretaries on page 8, the Constitution wording says 6.209, the Secretary shall record the minutes of all meetings of the chapter and shall sign all contracts and other instruments of business incurred by the chapter. The secretary shall maintain a permanent record of each member of the chapter, including name, address, telephone number, chapter roster number, and instrument played. In addition, the secretary shall be responsible for all chapter correspondence. So those three lines are underlined sections because they're pretty much the main points of being a secretary and things that should always be utmost priority. So recording minutes, make sure when you are doing that you're keeping your minutes professional with special detail around the motions and any discussion that was said with that motion. This is really good, especially when brothers need to look back on past minutes and understand what happened. So, and that's really great. Moving on to our next topic, because attendance. Make sure you track attendance of brothers at all meetings. As Grant said, this is mainly for active brothers to make sure they are fulfilling any chapter requirements that are put on them. And a great thing is with attendance for those brothers that are absent, minutes is a great place for them to learn what might have happened if it were a chapter meeting they missed. Contact information upkeep. Maintain a permanent record of each member of the chapter and update it when needed. The main points should always be their name, the school, their home address, their installation class, birthday, and instrument. Personally, my chapter does a birthday shout out at the beginning of each month and then on their day. So it's really good to have their birthday information. It makes them feel really special. And then of course, make sure you also have your alumni, active, and DOB and sponsors information. Moving on to some templates and suggestions for the secretary. With the minutes, make sure it's really good to have a minutes template for your chapter and officer meetings. This helps you personally with preparing for them. Instead of having to type out everything, you have all the bullet points and the officers' names listed, and then you just put in the information that the officers say. Make sure that you send out those minutes to your chapter brothers and DOB and sponsors no more than 48 hours before. If you send it a week later, people are kind of going to forget, or the information may not be as relevant. With agendas, make sure you also have a template for your chapter and officer meetings. Make sure that template looks visually different from the minutes, so that way when you're looking on a Google Drive or brothers are looking at the minutes and the agenda, they look different. Make sure that you post that agenda 24 hours at least before the meeting. This will let brothers know what's going to be, just go into each meeting understanding what to expect. Make sure you have that chapter roster with all their contact information shared to the officers. This is really great when they need to find or contact someone specifically. And again, with attendance, it's really good to have an absent form for brothers to fill out when they miss, and that form should have why they missed, if it was urgent, just to know for record in the future. And then this will also help officers know if they don't have quorum or if they do have quorum, if there is a vote needed. And share that attendance sheet with officers for them to also be informed. A great place for all of this information I just said is a Google Drive. It is amazing because you can keep all of your documents on there. You can have live documents, PDFs, and you can share all of that with your chapter officers and chapter brothers, so they can also make sure hey, I was present that day, and it's oh, I'm sorry, and then you can correct it. So transparency is really great, and that can be done with the Google Drive. So with quorum, sorry Grant, just to explain quorum, that is to let, so if you need to vote on anything, you need a minimum of number of chapter members to be able to do that. With most chapters, they require that there is quorum to even have a chapter meeting. It just makes it so much easier. And quorum can be, the number required can be mentioned in the national constitution.
Okay, sorry, I took the mic from you too early there. Treasurers
No
get
worries.
pumped. Treasurers, we're going to talk about treasurers. Okay, so treasurer-specific responsibilities. It's outlined there in some fancy constitutional wording, but I break it down in each of these bullet points to follow. So you have a responsibility as treasurers to control the receipts and disbursement of all monies. So what this means in current times, I would recommend making a PDF copy and at least one printed copy of all receipts and disbursements. So anytime that money is either going in or coming out of your bank account, whether that's on campus or off campus, you need to make sure that you're maintaining a record of that electronically, but also in physical format. Also be prepared to provide additional copies for recipients of payments or payees. So one practical way to do this is a receipt book for payees, so that you sign off it, you have a copy, and the payee has a copy. Budget ledger upkeep. So you have a responsibility to make sure that those things are updated regularly and accurate. This is where you're going to run into the most issues with your chapter. If you are not putting accurate information on here, that is their money that they're dealing with. They're either earned money through fundraising or either their actual money through chapter dues. So you need to be as transparent with other people's money as you possibly can be. And you need to make sure that the bank, headquarters, and your personal chapter records are all in agreement on what the numbers should be. And I would recommend checking those multiple places at least once a month, so long as there's something happening between months. So if you go a month and no money is moving in or out, there's no reason to check, obviously. But if you know that there has been some money moving through your bank account, you should probably check those different places and just make sure that they are all in alignment. Due collection and payment. So here's the part where I slow down talking a whole lot because this is super important. Dates to know. Patrick's already talked about it, but it's worth reiterating. September 30th is the chapter summary report and membership dues. Chapter summary report and membership dues. That is September 30th. Let me check my phone. Oh goodness, that's 17 days from now. The recommendation from the National Council, as well as for myself personally, is that you get that money sent off to headquarters at least 2 weeks in advance. So that's 2 days from now. And if you're freaking out about this, that's okay. There's time to do the necessary things to make sure those dues get in order. First thing you need to do is talk to your president, make sure that they're filling out the correct form and that they know where to fill out that form. But also make sure that your active membership has all gotten their dues into you. 30 days after third degree is the other time that you will be collecting and sending off dues at some point. And that is for initiate registration and dues. And here is the part where I'm going to say, don't collect dues after third degree, collect them before third degree. Because if you don't, you run into a problem that New Upsilon has ran into in the past, which is that you put a membership candidate all the way through the membership process. You go through third degree, everyone throws a party, then you say, give me your money. And one of the people says, I'm not gonna do that. I'm actually gonna drop out of the organization. That is less than ideal, to say the least, because there are a number of forms that have to be completed and you're already on a time crunch after third degree. And also they are privy to all of the information that they just learned at the 3 degrees. So in order to avoid that, collect dues before third degree. And if that is an issue for any of those membership candidates becoming members, then look into any payment plans that you could offer them through your bank account. Amounts to know, we've already talked about some of these. So the active dues each year are $105. Initiate dues, so this is a one-time due for those newly initiated members that you are going to collect before third degree. That is $125 per person. Honorary dues, again, this is a payment that you as a chapter are providing. It's not one that the honorary member is providing. And that is just $50, and that is a one-time guarantee, one-time lifetime thing. Chapter fee is $100 per year. So whenever you complete this form that is to be due September 30th, you will see $105, and then you will see multiplied by, and it'll say the number of members that you have in your chapter. And then your total amount will be $100 more than that listed amount up there. And that's because of the chapter fee. So you need to make sure that you are sending in that chapter fee in addition. Whether your band department covers that chapter fee, that would be a fun conversation to have with them. Here at Ball State, we're fortunate enough that our band department covers that fee. But if they don't, then that needs to come out of potentially chapter dues that you are raising as a chapter, or other fundraising that you've come up with. Reporting financial information. So you should report the financial information to the chapter, as we've already talked through. And another plug for the Google Drive, that is a very transparent way to do that, and it's regularly updated as you go along. If you don't have a Google Drive, I would recommend at least sending out quarterly full-on Excel spreadsheet reports that you send out to the whole chapter. And I would mention the account balance each week as part of your officer report in chapter meetings. Now, reporting to headquarters is done through the OMRS, which is linked there. And there are 2 times that you need to report financial information. It is December 1st on the fall activity report. Again, there's kind of this 2-week before deadline that I would always set for any of these deadlines. So I would seek to have all of the questions related to finances on that form completed by November 15th. And then June 1st, the chapter summary report is due. And there are financial questions on there, and I would recommend answering those at least by May 15th. But if your school ends like May 1st, I would have those questions answered prior to that. One, because there's probably not going to be money coming in or out of your account, so you already know the answers to that. 2, your sponsor and director of bands probably want to go home and not talk about Kappa Kappa Psi for a little bit. So get them while you can. While everyone's on campus, to go ahead and approve those forms and make sure that those go in on time. Now, specific templates and suggestions, meeting deadlines, we talked about just a whole heck of a lot of this already. Collection method, what's important is to understand the differences between on-campus versus off-campus bank accounts. If you're doing it on campus, there's probably a lot more regulations that your Office of Student Life or whatever the specific venue for that on-campus bank account are. A lot more additional requirements that they'll have than an off-campus bank account will have. So you need to be in a position to provide proof of purchase or cost. You might be asked to provide an IRS form from headquarters. We are here at Ball State at least. So if you have any questions about that, you can contact Di at headquarters, which her email is listed there. And there may be additional payment forms that you need to complete. It's important that you send a single check to headquarters. Don't send like you got everyone's dues and you said, okay, some of this is like coins. There's like some person only paid in coins and some person paid in a big stinking check. Don't send those things to headquarters, okay? Make one check, put it through your bank account, generate one check, and then send it off to headquarters. I'm going to slow down again because the consequence of late payment, if you send in your forms too late, is a 25% fee of the pending balance. And the chapter could potentially be placed on probation with all chapter activities suspended. That's terrifying, and you don't want to be the person responsible for getting a 25% fee. So that means that if you had to send in $1,000 for your membership dues, you would have to pay an additional $250 for simply missing the deadline. So make sure that, again, you meet that 2 week before deadline would be a good thing to do. As far as budgets are concerned, there's a budget template right there for you as part of these slides that you can access and that I would recommend. Whenever you utilize that or utilize any of your own budgets, make sure that you are, as you add line items to that budget, that you are checking the formulas so that it all adds up correctly to the totals at the bottom. It would be a good idea to leave comments on specific revenues and expenses if there's any questions about it, or if there's any odd looking amounts on there, just so people can look at it and say, okay, that's where that money came from, and it's not simply just an amount that's placed in there. And I would distribute that budget at least quarterly as a PDF, or if you have a Google Drive, just regularly update it. A fundraising calendar. So I would recommend that you, at the beginning of the year, set a fundraising calendar and that you integrate that into any other chapter-wide calendar. So if you have a recruitment calendar, or if you have any sort of brotherhood activity calendar, that all of those are integrated together so people can look at that, and make sure that you don't just like throw every single possible personal deadline into there, that you just throw what is relevant to the chapter. So specific fundraising dates. In your own personal calendar, you can keep track of, any of those due payment dates and any promotional dates that you have for those fundraisers.
Awesome. So going on to this is like a huge summary of everything, all the information we just talked about is here's the resource plug. So some resources out there, make sure that you take a look at the national and district websites. Those are great places to find not only everything we talked about today, but also the Southwest District has workshop recordings on there. So you can also not just read things, but you can also audibly listen to discussions that we've had previously. The national and district social media, this is make sure that you follow all of them, like your chapter follows them and your brothers do, for to learn more about like workshops that like today's workshop. The national listserv, district listserv, this is great to find contact information for chapters, national officers, district officers, and other things. The national and district constitutions and handbooks, that's great to make sure that everything you're doing is within line. And Grant will talk about the other 4.
Yeah, so the remaining ones real quickly to go through this. Risk management policies, this is the document that I referenced earlier. It's your way to make sure that you stay out of fraternal and legal trouble. Branding standards, this is to make sure that your promotional materials are in alignment with the standards set by the national organization. OMRS, this is how you report any of that financial information as we were talking before. And this is where a lot of cooperation and collaboration with the president will happen to complete those forms and to send them out. Officer manuals. This is, again, a document that is a little outdated at this point. This slide presentation is more updated, but there's some good information in there just to remind you of some of the things that we've talked about in this presentation.
Awesome. So organizational points of contact, we always highlight our headquarters staff, Thais Viva, our national accountant. You can contact her at hqna@kkytvs.org. Robert Bratcher, he can help you with any promotion stuff. He's our national publications manager. You can contact him at podium@kkytvs.org. And then, of course, all of our district secretary treasurers, they are all very knowledgeable in every area of the secretary and treasurer world. Cool.
So I think we're ready to move on to questions if you have any.
Cool. So let's go ahead and stop the screen share if you wouldn't mind. Awesome. Well, once again, thank you to both of our speakers, Grant and Patrick, for taking the time to do the research, to put this together and to present to all of us here. So I'm just going to go, I was taking some notes here as I was listening, just to kind of, I'll reiterate some points, and because I know some of you had submitted questions about this. When it comes to collecting dues, you can really go about it in a number of ways. One, just avoid cash if at all possible. Just avoid cash. Avoid collecting cash, avoid sending cash. I'll just say don't do it. Secondly, of course, like it was mentioned, you can send a check in, but just make sure that when it comes to those who handle finances, that let's say if you write a number to send out to headquarters for all the dues, make sure that you have collected that money first. Don't be like, oh, if a couple people are missing, like, okay, we'll just collect it later. We've seen some chapters where the treasurer didn't know that there were certain expenses being made. So you send out this amount of money, assuming you would have enough. But then the chapter president or whoever buys things for the chapters, but like in that time period, didn't report that to you just yet. You didn't know. So again, just make sure that you are very vigilant about collecting the money first. If any of you are going to do payment plans, I think payment plans are a great way, especially nowadays with some of the financial struggles for some of our students. Make sure that you have enough finances, enough funds to pay for their dues while you're collecting. Something that my chapter ran into a while back was like, oh yeah, we just, we never really ran into financial issues, but we also didn't realize the fact that like, oh, our fundraisers are later, so we won't have them as much money as we usually do. So we were paying ahead of time for our chapter members, but then we just didn't have the money in the account. So it got messy. All right. So when it comes to finances, another thing I want you to stray away from is if you can collect it via Venmo or PayPal or whatever, just don't use your personal one. Dear God, don't use your personal one, because that could also get so messy that could potentially get you into legal trouble with either your university. I mean, like it's very messy. So if your chapter has its own bank account that you can open a Venmo, utilize that. Go through that. There are also like invoices through PayPal that if you want to track things. There's a lot of different ways to go about it, but whatever you do, just make sure that you personally are not tied to it, that the chapter president is not personally tied to it, that the sponsor DOB is not personally tied to it. Cool? Because again, it just gets very messy and we just don't want to get anyone into trouble. So with that being said, I know that you all had submitted some other questions as well. So we'll start with some open-ended questions here. But I wanted to ask really anybody in this group, what are some suggestions or some of the things you have done well as a chapter? So this can be anybody, because we want this to be a brainstorm as well. So if you're a chapter secretary, treasurer, whatever, if you have some things that have worked well for your chapter, can you would you be willing to share with us?
I know hi, my name is Destiny. I'm from New Omicron. Hi. I know for my chapter, we did some summer meetings, just like not required, but we did some summer meetings, and that's really been helpful for us to kind of guide into the fall a little bit smoother and make sure we have everything prepared. And so when August came, when like end of August came around, when school started, we were a lot more prepared to kind of handle things. Things were a lot more in order. We were able to get some things straightened up with nationals, and it ended up being a much smoother process than what we had feared end of May when the previous year had ended, school year.
Okay, great. So no, thank you so much for sharing. And then that is a great example of how a chapter kind of goes through, clears up some things, and is able to kind of move forward from any of the ambiguity or any of the area that you may have not known from last semester or whatnot. So thank you for sharing. What else? What else has worked well for your chapter? Like, is anyone really good with like, wow, like our minutes are bomb. Like we have it down, or budgets or anything. Because I want to check the temperature to see how we're doing. Like if we need to really drill on these resources, then that way I can advocate for you on the National Council. But if you're all doing great, then, so just help me out here.
I have something. Oh no, Daniel's got something. No, Daniel
Okay.
should go, not me.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm from the Epsilon Pi chapter. I'm our recording secretary at Kansas State. Something that we've been doing as a chapter, and it's obviously not new, is that we've been utilizing PowerPoints during our weekly meetings. That way it eliminates any like awkward silence moments on Zoom and keeps the meeting going along pretty well online. As opposed to like when it used to be in person and everything ran pretty well because everyone was there. It just eliminates like that weird awkward silence and keeps things moving along. And I think it's been working really well.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. And honestly, like, I mean, as we're all transitioning to Zoom, I mean, there are some days where I can be energetic, but there are also some times where I'm like, kill me. Like, I can't do this anymore. So that's a great way to I mean, like you mentioned, that awkward silence, and sometimes people slip in, they slip out. So great. I appreciate that. Who else? Grant, you had something?
Sure. I have two things that I think have really improved my fraternal experience, both at a chapter and district level. The first is something that Patrick and I like mentioned a couple of times, but I just want to hammer home, is that a Google Drive is like, if we at New Upsilon didn't have a Google Drive, we would have, we wouldn't have made it to our second birthday here in a couple of months. And we're not worried about that now, but it totally got our whole chapter organized. And it can be, that can be a place that all of our pillars can be represented. We can represent leadership in there by having our officers and even our members contribute different files in there that are important. It has kept us so organized so that meetings are more efficient because you can just reference things and you can link things that are on the Google Drive. People don't have to go all over the place to look for where those resources are. They're all in one place. So that has been a big benefit to us. The other thing that I'll mention is one thing to consider with minutes, and this actually comes from a conversation that I had with Bong once, but I would recommend ending the minutes with action items. So you just put the word action items, and then you put a bulleted list. And throughout the meeting, not even throughout the meeting, in the North Central District, I do this after the meeting. I look back over the minutes and I look at different things that we said that we were going to do before the next meeting. And all I did was just list those at the bottom, and put maybe the person or the group of people. If it's a committee, you put communications committee, do this thing before the next meeting. Jerry, do this thing before the next meeting. You make a full list of action items, and then that's the thing that you can send out as a reminder before the next meeting. Halfway through the week, if you have weekly chapter meetings, you can just send out that action items list. It makes your job a whole lot easier, and it makes everybody else's job a whole lot easier. Also, when you're looking to make the next agenda, you already got your next agenda. It's in those action items. So that was definitely one of the best things that I've learned from a secretary standpoint.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's something as simple as putting together a list, because I don't know how many, I'm sure you've all done this, but like you go through the meeting, you have your minutes, and you're like, cool, oh, what were we supposed to do? You just don't know, because your mind is shifted to the next thing. It's natural. It's very natural for all of us and any of us. So those action items, like from a professional, fraternal, personal, like those help so much. If you are not a Google user, you don't have to be, but just know that KKSci emails, you can sign up for a free email. It is a Google Suite interface, so you can obviously sign one up. Or if your chapter has one, just ask your president for access to that so you can keep something. Because my point being, you may think that the secretary and treasurer role is very limited to your year. Like, you don't know what your impact is, but I can tell you, future officers or people who want to learn more about being an officer or being in your position will thank you, because you are the record keeper. You are keeping things so that they can look like, how did we spend money in the past? Where did that money go? Because there will always be discrepancies when it comes to money, right? So your impact, just being organized in that way, uploading it somewhere in one place that people can find for years to come, they will thank you. It is such a big impact, more than you realize. Cameron has a question. Cameron, the floor is yours.
Hi, yes. So on your earlier point about asking like what chapters are doing well, I think we're doing really well with our organization of like our Google Drive that we have for our chapter. But I've always been curious about how other chapters record their minutes and like different layouts that they use. Because we have a layout that we've been using for a while, but it might not be the best. So I just want to get I was going to ask if you could maybe send out like an example of what you use or what other brothers have used for minutes in the past for their chapter meetings.
Yeah, so what I can do is I can, if Patrick and Grant will be so kind to remind me, to send out like a copy of our student advisory committee meeting minutes. And the way I'm doing it, I'm shifting from the traditional school of thought where, because there's so many documents, like, and I get busy and I don't know what's going on. I make it easy for myself to do my job. So what I do is I set the agenda on a Google Doc, and from there we use that agenda, and that eventually becomes, it still has the same layout as the agenda, but I use each point, and I have the secretary, whoever's the record keeper, start typing in notes into the agenda. So then it becomes the meeting minutes. So you're not messing with two different documents. And then so from there, what I'll do is I'll send out an email with the recording once I render the video and upload it, the slides, and then the example. Does that work for you, Cameron?
Yes, that works great. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Awesome. So some other things to think about as well here is that, like I mentioned, you may have ran for this position, and now with everything happening, you may kind of feel like, well, what is my role? What isn't my role? The main thing I want to drive across for you is that your role is so incredibly important, because you are maintaining a sense of normalcy for your chapter that I mean, like, so many people are wanting right now. So if you've seen the Avengers, for example, those people that just kind of like disappeared, like you don't want your chapter to kind of look back in 2020, 2021. They're like, what happened? Like, there's nothing here. Right. So you want to be able to provide that framework and that infrastructure for future years to happen, because you don't want to set them up for failure. Right. So I'm telling you, your positions are so incredibly important when it comes to finances, when it comes to having that internal communications piece. Like, those are very, very important. So with this being said, there's already a lot of information for you to digest. take the time to digest it, formulate further questions, and we will have more specific trainings for you when it comes to the treasurer role, when it comes to all sorts of secretary roles. But also talk to your district officers and let them know, like, hey, this is what we need further guidance on. Because I will tell you, on the national front, we are figuring things out as well. Things are changing at a very high rate that we are doing our best to make sure that we are providing training and resources for all of you. But this needs to be a dialogue, right? We're not going to dictate how things are going to change. We are trying to be proactive, and that proactive requires students' help, because you are essentially helping us mold what this looks like for you. Make sense? So I'm going to switch things over. I'm gonna give co-host or host rights to Patrick or Grant. I have to jump on a call with the Southeast District. So I'm gonna leave them with one last question here, and then feel free to continue to ask questions. But my question for them to answer here is, if they could just give you one piece of advice or one thing for you to focus on as a Sec Trej, what would that be? So I'm gonna leave things over, and okay, so one of you has host, right? Fantastic. I'm gonna jump off a call for the Southeast District, but I wanted to thank all of you for your time, for jumping on, and please be on the lookout for further communication about trainings, okay? All right, thank you all.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you,
Thanks,
Patrick.
Bob.
Patrick, you're the host. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
So do you want to field Bong's question?
Ooh. All right, let me tackle this. So one thing that I would suggest to take away from all of today, and like one thing to like continue for this year, and I think for me personally too, is that have fun with your position. Like, know that mistakes will happen, and that's okay, and you just got to learn from them. It's like, don't like dwell on what happened, but just learn how to, like, how can I improve on that mistake? Like, for me personally, in the past secretary, when I was a past secretary, I would have so many typos and like wrong things, and it's okay. Like, that happens. So just like be positive. Mistakes happen, but just learn from them and be creative.
That's beautiful. Oh my goodness. How do I follow that up? My one recommendation, so you may have noticed that I got totally like kicked out of my previous room, which was super embarrassing and very stressful. They were like, we actually have this room. So now I'm in a new location. But when I was in that old room, there was something written on the chalkboard when I first went in there that like totally floored me, because I'd been like panicking all day about this thing. And all it said was, don't forget why you're here. That's all it said. It was like all lower caps, and it had a period at the end. Almost cried, because that's the type of person I am. But also, like, that's my recommendation to you, is don't forget why you're here, meaning why you became secretary or treasurer. There had to be something that drove you to do that, because let's be honest, secretary and treasurer aren't the most exciting positions in the world. So there's something that drove you to do that. And whether that was, you know, a purpose to be a resource for other people, or, you know, to make an impact on your chapter, then stick and live that out. You know, like right now, that purpose, I think, is a lot easier to be obscured by everything going on. It's really easy for me to walk around campus and totally forget like why I'm on campus, why I'm going to school. So like, if you keep that at the center, and you never forget why you're doing it, then you know you'll be in good shape to do the right things, and understand that you have resources available to you throughout this presentation, but also just like contact information for Patrick and myself, and contact information with the other people in this call. You have resources to help you out. So long as you keep your why at the center, you'll be able to figure out the how with everyone else around you. So that's my one recommendation to you. Goodness gracious. So are there any questions from the peanut gallery? Anything at all? Nothing? Oh my gosh, we were so articulate that there were no questions at all. Patrick, do you have any thoughts?
Actually, I have one. I didn't want to interrupt Bong earlier, but one thing as far as minutes goes that we've been doing, and I actually learned this from our student advisory committee meetings, is to put in a win. So like at the top, at the very, very top, like you have like you put like I'm here, and then you have like wins, and then you just put like something awesome that's happened. Like, well, for us it would be like within that past month or like week or day, and it could be even something like I got up and I had a boba tea for breakfast, and that's totally cool. Like, hey, if that's your win, like that's awesome. Like that is a like that's an awesome win. So yeah, like, and that can help with some brotherhood. Um, like in my we have an outreach committee and I chair it, and um one of I wouldn't have even known, but one of our brothers like won a scholarship, and it's like, oh my gosh, like wow, like I wouldn't have known if you would have said like that was my win for that like for that year. So just like one thing to like help with some brotherhood stuff, and that can be done like through a Google Doc. Since it's a live document, they can just type it in or they can say it, but just a little takeaway.
Great. Great suggestion. I have one question for the peanut gallery, which is, well, I probably have more than one, but I have one on the mind right now, which is how many people's fundraising plans just fell through after all that's gone on? Yeah. Because I know a lot of our fundraising plan, oh yeah, thumbs up. I know a lot of our fundraising plans were probably dependent on being on campus, in person, around other people. I don't know about you, but that's not really the world we live in anymore. So there will be further guidance about fundraising, I'm sure, in the treasurer specific part. But I just want to say, like, know again that there are resources available to you for financial support. In a lot of districts, there are district grants that you can apply for. In a lot, at the national level, there are grants that you can apply for to receive some funds. Also, consider, you have to have that difficult conversation with your chapter, which is about chapter dues. And if you're going to change that amount, if you're going to increase it or decrease it or maintain it or get rid of it, that's a difficult conversation you have to have. You have to consider, what sort of resources people have personally to contribute to an increased due payment, or if it would be in everyone's best interest, if the chapter's in a good financial shape, maybe you decrease that chapter due, because right now a lot of people are personally burdened financially. So also look into more virtual formats for fundraising, which are not ideal, but there are ways to virtually fundraise. Crowdfunding is a means to do that. I would recommend merchandise would be a really good thing to invest in this year. And I know that there would be plenty of people that would be willing, I would be willing to purchase plenty of your merchandise. So long as you promote it, I think there will be opportunities for fundraising all around. So know that just because the year went to crap doesn't mean that your fundraising efforts need to go to crap. Okay. Are there any additional questions or thoughts? Look at that teaching technique from Patrick. We call that wait time. He's just waiting for a response. Patrick, do you have something?
No, I don't think I do. Any last minute questions from the bros?
Well, here's what I'll do. I'm going to throw my officer email into the chat so that you know what that resource is. And feel free to email me with any questions, or email me or Patrick or Bong with any questions that you have about things that we talked about today, or even just questions that come up, as soon as you leave the call and you're like, well, dang, I should have asked that question. Feel free to email us anytime. Okay. Does anyone have any last thoughts before we sign out? Okay. Well, thank you all for attending. Patrick, do you have any last thoughts?
No, just know that we're all in this together, and happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. Thank you all so much. See you later.